presentation and both the nuances of different options available to consider for amending the affordable housing groups. And I will let Russell and Alex take it from here. First, we have our agenda with no public comment. And from there, we will move on to our second topic, which is evaluating.
Did we want to spend some time on this?
So first, we have our query, which was raised at our smaller group meeting, but first point, namely, what is the goal we're trying to achieve through calibration of the cash contribution? We had some discussion mainly about the potential offsets and dimensions that we should consider for making sure that the ordinance change did not indirectly impact different areas of the housing market at adverse ways. But from there, I think we'll broadly agree that there has to be some sort of change to bring parity to the formula such that choice is not so often made to make cash contributions. Instead, bring a level of equality between the options chosen. So, slide.
So by way of reminder, the ordinance has 4 methods of compliance. The first being the on-site contribution, which is calculated at 5% of the gross floor area above the first 1.0 floor area ratio. We went over that in our May meeting, and escalating contributions for offsite or offsite further away from the project site. And then the last one, the fourth, which we've been are deliberating tonight, the cash contribution, which is a tiered contribution based on the total gross floor area. So some options for recalibrating the ordinance's cash contribution provision. The first option is simply using the framework as it is right now, using the method that's in place in our ordinance, and adjusting that amount so that it's more in line with the actual value of that foregone revenue from the unit. Advantages to using this option is that it uses the existing structure. It's known. It's less complicated of an amendment. It's simply changing the numbers. The disadvantages to this option would be that it continues to negatively impact or have a greater weight on developments with lower base densities, particularly below 1.3 FAR. And it's not related directly in any way to the on-site contribution, which is the principal method outlined in the ordinance. A second option would be to restructure the formula so that it directly relates to that on-site unit contribution. The on-site unit contribution is based on that 5% above the first 1.0 FAR, 5% of the floor area. So a factor could be applied to that so that the two are relating to each other instead of being distinctly separate concepts. The advantage to that option would be that they're related, and that it would produce a flat rate across all projects of all densities from 1.01 all the way up to 10. It's a flat rate, the same dollars per square foot of required per project. So it's, I think, relatively easy to explain. Some of the disadvantages, I think the main disadvantage is it's something new. It's a departure from the way that it's been done for the last 20 years. If other people think of other disadvantages, we can talk about them. Option 3, similar, would be to restructure that formula so it directly relates to that on-site contribution, but including a tiered rate that increases with density. Our current formula has a tiered structure one tier is the first FAR, and then from 1 to 3 FAR, it's the second tier, and then there's a higher contribution rate for anything above 3.0 FAR. So if we had a tiered thing that it echoes something that's in the current zoning ordinance. The advantage of this would be it relates back to that tiered structure. The disadvantage is it would provide escalating rates as projects get more dense. The impact would be that much greater. Disadvantages, it's a departure from the previous method. Get one. Although this was cited as an advantage, it's also a disadvantage. The escalating rates, certainly it could be seen both ways, depending on the hat you're wearing. It's also more complex than the previous one. It adds another level of complexity, which complexity is always, I think, it's harder to explain. And then a fourth option. So we're leaving it at 4. And we can discuss them in a second. But the fourth would be, so 2, 3, and 4 all kind of restructure the formula so that it's related to that on-site contribution. But in option 4, we would have 2 different rates, basically one rate for higher cost areas for the metro planning corridors, so the Ross and Balsam corridor and the Crystal City, Pentagon City, Richmond Highway corridor, and then the rest of the county or projects that are outside of those corridors, because the land values, the costs, and the rents that our projects are able to charge are vastly different in those 2 scenarios. So the advantages of option 4 would be that it relates to the other compliance mechanism for on-site units, that it has flat rates across the board, given that there's the 2 geographies, and it recognizes and accounts for differences in these main kind of submarkets that we have, metro corridors and non-metro. The disadvantages would be, again, it's a departure from what we've done before, and it is slightly more complex. So there may be more advantages and disadvantages. I've created a couple here, but I guess I'm going to turn it back to Brian, because we'd just like to have a discussion about the merits and what people's thoughts or opinions are on these options, if you prefer one or the other. But Brian, back to you.
Thank you. So those are the 4 options that staff and I going over the last couple of weeks, just so that people can have a range of things to decide from, trying to capture from the least complicated to relatively more complicated options. Each will capture different aspects of the housing dimension. For example, option 4 has, I think, beneficially a portion that deals with the housing submarkets, right? So there's a level of nuance there relative to the other options. If you like just having a lot of simplicity, option 1 is available, because it's a kind of brute force changing of the numbers. There's the least amount of change that goes in there compared to options 2, 3, 4. So just to give a range of choices for us to deliberate over, I'd rather first hear what everyone has to think about these before giving my thoughts on the options. But I'd love to have a conversation about these in terms of where you think the county should be moving as we look to develop our new policy. So yes.
So I just have a question, being the scientist. Could we work out some examples? Take 3 prototypical buildings in different areas and then run the numbers? Because my overriding goal is how many people can we have? And so I look at these and I don't know how to compare them, because I have no way to rank them.
Right, I guess.
And I would have said, which ones get us the most money? So, I mean, we need to see, this is all words, and Russell, you're doing a great job. But we actually want to see, we want to get more, right? So how do we get more with these options? And I'm very simple, and I will look at, and I'll just lay it on the table. I live in Roslyn, and the county board is going to consider Penzance, one Roslyn, 7.5 million contribution, 65 offsite units. Now, under the code, they got to build it there. I'm president of the Roslyn Civic Association. We don't care where they're built. We want them to be built. True Ground is building a very innovative project right in a nice area of North Arlington. Great. We have Quincy Court in Roslyn. Great. It's right across the street from a very high-end condo. All right. So we would like, I think the residents of Arlington would like more affordable housing. It's nice to be scattered. It's nice to have all that kind of stuff. But scattered is like, you really don't see the force of it. When you see a property that's being built in back of, and I used to call that Rive Gauche, that nice little shopping center there, Erewhine, that is a significant thing. All right. So that's where I'm coming from.
Great. I just said, could you describe more specifically what the statement so that it directly relates to the on-site?
Right, so right now we have formula for on-site units. And we have a formula that is totally unrelated for a cash contribution. So for a cash contribution, it's looking at the total gross floor area, whereas we net out that first FAR on site. So they'll never talk to each other or relate to each other because they weren't designed that way. And that's one of the reasons why smaller projects that are just barely above 1.0 FAR, the amount that they have to pay because they have to pay for that whole 1.0 FAR, which was netted out of the unit. So their requirement in square feet is small, but their dollar amount is really high. So those are the few projects that might be inclined to provide units on site because the costs are really high for them to do the cash contribution. So by restructuring it, you get because Matt grabbed me in the hallway and he had trouble with the concept too. So I grabbed some slides. So in May we talked about this. So this is how the on-site units are calculated. So you have a site area of 50,000 square feet. You have a project that's 162,000 square feet that has a floor area ratio of 3.24, excuse me. And so we calculate for that on-site requirement is 5% of the FAR above. You take that 50,000 of the site area out and you get 112,000 times 5%, gets you 5,600 square feet. So whatever number of units that relates to that is, but the requirement is actually a square footage requirement, not a unit requirement. With the method for the cash contribution, we're including that first FAR, and we've got these tiers that go up at different rates. So the first 50,000 is at that tier 1, and that yields a certain number, 122,000. And then from 1 to 3 FAR, so the next 100,000 square feet is at a higher rate. And then what's above that 3.0, that other little 0.24 FAR would be at an even higher rate. So that's the way these two currently are. So they're unrelated to each other. They look totally different from each other. And so what the second option that we talked about tonight was on all projects, they're calculating what this requirement is for an on-site unit. So you take that requirement, the 5,600 square feet, we multiply it by some contribution rate, a dollar amount, which, and I know, and I want to recognize Joe's comments that part of this exercise is to see how we can increase that dollar rate so it's more in line with the actual value of what those providing the affordable housing would be. So that, I don't know if that helps to
Yes, I think it
put
does.
those together. Yes.
Russell, can I
One,
ask
one quick clarification, sorry, is the 5,600 square foot allocation for an on-site unit, is that gross or rentable square footage?
That's based on the GFA.
Gross.
Growth based on growth.
Gross.
So Russell, your calculation, when you just did the calculation, resulted in $933,000, right?
Right. And so if
And divide that by 8 units.
I wouldn't divide by 8 units, I would divide by the square feet because it's the square feet that's the real kicker there. But if you want to divide by 8 units, we'll divide.
Well, I mean, those seem like pretty cheap units.
Yeah, this project, as it's 933, 320, divided by 8, 116,000, which is a little bit less than we're actually getting in the in our current cash contribution. But that's because perhaps we have a lot more higher density projects for
So, and the 3.0 plus, back when they did the ordinance, that was, we didn't have a lot of 10.0 FAR back then, right? I mean,
Yeah.
So part of the rationale for saying we should add another tier is that in fact, we've gone up in locations considerably higher than 3.0. And that there's a lot higher value at the 8s and the 9s and the 10s for the development. Right? I mean, I'm kind of looking for what's the rationale here and, figuring out the proper way to tie these two ideas together of the onsite and the dollars is something that's been a befuddlement to me for a long time. I'll just be honest. I don't quite know how to do it. I think when you talk to people about it, they're like, well, why should it be way less? But if we don't have a mechanism that everybody agrees is a fair mechanism to end up there, and what you just showed it to me doesn't prove the point, unfortunately. So, well, I agree, Joe wants to get more units. And, we need to know, I believe you're absolutely right. We need to see 3 or 4 scenarios where each one of these options kind of gets played out so we can understand. There's probably some sweet spot here that isn't going to cause anybody, too much angst, but will actually improve the situation. But it's really hard to know it from these things. And, philosophically, I'm like, yeah, I could see it being different in the RV corridors and Crystal City than on the Pike and Langston. On the other hand, we're kind of built out on the corridors. So does it really matter? Does it really matter? Isn't the next generation really about the Pike and Langston?
Why tax this specific area more when it's already kind of built out?
Right, and quite honestly, having lived on it for 40 some years, it's contributed really a lot to a lot of things about Arlington. Maybe not as much in affordable housing as we might want, but anyway, that's kind of where I'm still looking for what's the story? What? So that sounded like Michelle. It
Yeah,
was.
I can't tell if you guys can see me at all.
Here,
Oh, we can.
Okay,
can
I've
see-
got my hand raised, so I want to ask a question that's also an idea.
Yes.
Are you ready? Okay, sorry. I'm sorry that I'm not there. I had a family conflict again, and I apologize for not being at many of these meetings at all. Again, lots of various conflicts, but in response to the multiple options that you've got here, and the thing that Mary pointed out before, which was that one of the points, one of the reasons that we have the some of the provisions of the ordinance is because we want to have a distribution of affordable housing. So that was the desire for on-site units, was to try to have a distribution of affordable housing in the areas where there's development happening. So it occurred to me when you were going through these options that in the one where you have the metro planning corridors being the deciding factor, on what rate gets applied, couldn't there be some other criteria for deciding what rate gets applied? In particular, what if the criteria for deciding whether you get a high rate, a medium rate, or a low rate for your, multipliers, what if that criteria were how much affordable housing is already in the area that you're building? So if, for instance, and I don't know what I think about this yet, I'm just throwing this out because it came to mind and it was relevant to a couple of these issues all at once, is if you've got an area that has less affordable housing in it, and I don't know how we would define that, whether it's by percentage or numbers or something, and by what area, but if an area with less affordable housing in it, and you've got a proposed project there, then having a higher dollar contribution multiplier would equalize the on-site units, be more likely to equalize the on-site units versus dollars comparison, which also means you're more likely to possibly get some on-site units, which would be a good thing because it seems to have been hard to have gotten them in that area. So does that make sense? Am I making sense? And maybe you've already talked about that. I'm not sure if the metro planning corridor issue was already discussed as a group.
No, so I just want to make sure I understand your suggestion clearly. So you're saying if we were to tie the amount of contribution to the percentage, say, of affordable housing units at a certain level of affordability, concentrate in a certain area. So if there's a geographical area where there's a low concentration, low density of these kind of units, then the contribution amount would be higher in those areas. Is that right?
Yes. Again, I don't know what I think about it, and obviously we'd have to see, like, well, does that do what we intend for it to do? But on my first thought about it is that it would get at that question, or that other component of this whole ordinance, which is equalizing distribution of affordable housing in some way. And not just writing off the idea of ever having any on-site units coming through the ordinance.
I think there's an interesting idea, Michelle, and I think just to maybe flesh it out and play devil's advocate for a second.
Yeah.
I think the reason that there probably isn't much affordable housing in certain areas of the county because the market hasn't incentivized having those low affordable housing projects in those parts of the county. So I'm not sure that, for lack of a better word, taxing those developments to get more affordable housing there is an incentive to bring in the housing, right? I think it has to be some sort of incentive to make people want to have more affordable housing in certain parts of the county where the land value is higher, cost of development's higher, and so on.
Yeah,
And
then we get caps through base density, but a lot of it's through the bonus density, and bonus density is limited when we cap height limits. So what happens is we have all this density, available, but because of the sector plan says, oh, you got to cut off at like 10 stories, and we know like 10 stories not feasible because it's, once you hit at 7 or whatever, it drops out. So it's like we get these like, oh, we're gonna go down to 7, boom, and then you cap. So we have a lot of different caps and other things. You get, as we see with our ordinance, the more base density you're using up, the higher you pay for it. So, I think I really like the option of looking at how, for site plans that take up more of the base densities, or a way that we can somehow make it less penalizing to take up the full base, and then perhaps, look at bonus density as well, because that's a huge play to get the on-site or other numbers.
Well, I want to let Michelle finish her point, but I want to say that the bonus density conversations outside the realm of our work here. So I don't want us to stray over there for now. But Michelle, I heard you were going to make another point in what you're saying.
Yeah, I was just in response to Matt saying that it sounds like this would be taxing the the projects, for example, along Langston Boulevard, because other than that one, the big proposal that's obviously taking place with Lucky Gardens right now, there's a much lower percentage of CAFs up there on Langston Boulevard. So a project that would be proposed up there under this idea that I threw out would be more likely to have a higher dollar amount in whatever the formula is, and therefore more likely to put some on-site units. So Matt was saying, well, why would we be taxing those projects? And I look at it less as taxing than sort of putting a heavier weight on the potential to get on-site units. And through using the mechanism of a higher per square footage contribution. But you can look at it the other way too. So if you've got a project going up in an area that already has a lot of CAFs in it. So let's just use an example of, somewhere on the western end of Columbia Pike, that those projects would have a lower dollar amount per unit. And so they would pay out, probably, because that's what happens when you have a lower dollar amount per unit. But they're being done in areas where there already is a very large amount of affordable housing. I don't know. Again, I don't know exactly what I think about it. It just came to mind as we were talking, but as long as everybody has heard my idea, that's all I wanted to do was put it out there.
So just for examples, like in Langston Boulevard, there's Waverly Ridge, which is being proposed with 47 townhouses. And because it's less than 1.0 FAR, they're not providing any committed affordable housing because it's below the threshold. But if it were, it's 122,000 square feet. So it provide 122,000 in for AHIF. But if you look at that per unit, that's another $2,500 for these relatively small. I mean, they're townhouses, but they're ranging from 1,700 to 2,600 square feet, 3 and 4 bedroom townhouses. So, to me, it's like, okay, do we want to, apply, extract whatever $100,000, $150,000 worth affordable housing and, charge, apply this, whatever you tax fee, whatever, $2,500 per unit that gets passed off to the buyer, who is, these townhouses are going to be significantly smaller, lower costs than the surrounding new construction homes that are being built around there. 47 homeownership homes, with low HOAs because they're not an elevator and all that sort of thing. It doesn't really sound that intuitive of say, okay, that area besides, look at the map here, besides Lucky Gardens and then a couple others, west of 66 and north of 66, there's not much affordable housing there. But to me, it doesn't really make sense. Like, how much more are we gonna apply a formula to get, one CAF there or some other thing when already that site is not being feasible to build the previous site plan for many years now, and now that there's townhouses there. So I feel like that it could really burden these small sites that just are not really feasible if we start really applying these thousands and thousands of dollars per unit to go to affordable housing when these are already some of the most affordable new construction, smaller family sized units, this nice suites. I mean, they're not like, below 1,500 per se, but they're still fairly small and going to fill a big market. It just like, I don't know why we're analyzing these compared to the alternative around there versus saying, oh no, we're going to load up, try to get these to extract for, CAFs when, like I said, we could have like bigger developments elsewhere that are essentially helping fund, the Lucky Gardens redevelopment. So it's like, like having this micro targeted on locations and neighborhoods. I'm just not seeing the balance of what it's going to do.
To Michelle's point, I guess there were two things. One of the first things we heard when we were all together at the first meeting, presentations, was that for affordable housing is important. It doesn't have to be on site. It could be anywhere in the county. It matters. And if we want to change that view and say, no, we want it distributed, that's a different goal. And we should talk about it as a different goal. But the other thing is, if they don't put the CAFs in those currently low density affordable housing areas, AHIF money could be spent anywhere else in the county to build the affordable housing. So even though they'd be taxed more, the affordable housing isn't necessarily going to be anywhere near that new build.
Yeah, and I think this is get back to the fundamental question we talked about numerous times. I mean, what's the goal? Is it more AHIF or is it more on-site? I mean, it's gonna be hard to have both. I don't think we've settled on what the preference is.
Does anybody, I don't know this, but how many CAFs have we generated in the last year or 5 years, some number of years versus money?
Yeah. So I mean, if you go if you get new construction CAFs, like fiscal year 2021, 242, 2022, 215, 2023, 21, 2024, 132. Of course, we preserved a lot, like Barcroft in 2022 was like 1,300. So like the preservation is huge, but I would say I think average about a little under like I got average 170 new construction CAFs per year last 5 fiscal years on average.
And then Russell did research a couple meetings ago to think how many units were through AF contributions versus on-site CAFs.
Yeah.
Right. And what was the breakdowns? Like 85, 15, 9, 10 AF.
Versus on-site?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You were
saying,
I know what you're talking about 2 meetings ago. Broke
Yeah.
that down. You guys felt like 85,
It was
15.
well more than the majority.
Yeah.
Majority of it was
AHIF.
AHIF,
Yeah.
right? So that was my question. How many CAFs, how many on-site? They don't even have to be on-site. The developer can provide CAFs elsewhere, but they don't.
Yeah.
But they don't.
They
don't.
It's
Okay.
hard. It's a hard deal to pull off.
Yeah,
Okay.
9%
So-
are CAFs are from land use.
Okay.
9%.
We get a bigger bang for the buck with AHIP, right? I mean, the CAFs are, first of all, the name just kind of eludes me. It sounds weird, but it's got no impact. You talk to someone, a taxpayer, and you explain CAF, they're going to go, what are you talking about? They will know of what they read in Arlington Now, what True Ground is building in this nice area. 200, how many units, Danny?
Well, I mean, there's 432 at Grisel's 3.
The one in back of Barrel Wine there, the one.
Oh, you're talking about the Lucky Gardens one?
Yeah.
It's like 200.
Right, and then the Walgreens site, is that all affordable?
No.
No?
Goodwill.
Yeah, Goodwill will be affordable, Melwood will all be affordable, Crystal 6. So what I'm saying is, and I hate to say this, but I'm looking at the entire debate on missing middle, which leaves a lot of bad taste in people's minds. And they really don't understand what it is because the people in Country Club Hills think they're going to have public housing there, which they're not. When the county announces that they're actually building something and it's affordable, I mean, when Quincy Court went up, we loved it. It's great. 264 units. All right. Mirabel, it sticks out when you come down Route 50. It looks like a great Taj Mahal. People know what it is, and it blends in with the community, and people are living there, and we're getting our bang for the buck. I think that's what we should be doing. This stuff, frankly, and Russell, I commend you, because if I had to do gaffes and all this formula stuff, I would take drugs, right? Because no one understands what it is. I can't explain this to people, all right? They look at me as though I'm crazy. So I think we now have an opportunity to make it simple. Keep it simple, stupid. We should be doing KISS. All right, keep it simple, stupid.
The slogan here.
Well, you know who said that? James Carville. All right, I'm dating myself, right? Remember President Clinton?
92.
Okay, okay.
So I think with that, and I actually want to go down that road a little bit more because, and I'm generally in agreement. I think focusing on the AHIP side of things is probably where we're going to get a lot of utility out of this. And I think to your point is a really good one that even if we were to weight the amount of on-site unit as a function of percentage of affordable units in a certain area, there's no guarantee that that's where any of those affordable units be built, right? Like, so I think that's something that we should keep in mind, and therefore leans the conversation more into the realm of talking about trying to increase AHIF, because then you can have a conversation more about dealing with developments or projects rather for developments are already in the pipeline that don't have the funding yet, right? And we've had conversations about that before in the previous meetings, that there are a lot of projects the county wants to do, but we just don't have the money for it at the moment, the AHIF funds. But if we were to focus more on that, then that allows us to perhaps begin to build out more strategically instead of thinking about things and sort of think of like Jenga, where you've got this tower, you're just trying to like pull things out without having the whole tower collapse on you. So if we just go make it simple, go with the AHIF, then it kind of eliminates at least half of that problem.
So Brian, basically what we say that is that distribution is the county's problem in terms of how it distributes AHIP.
Yes.
Distribution is not necessarily the developer's problem. But for me, it really only works though if we also deal with the bonus density piece of it. I mean, to me, I think that's where the big money is, honestly, is in the bonus density units. And I think Jason's point about, do we want to have this ordinance apply to affordable home ownership is a really good point. You know, units that are built for affordable home ownership, should we recognize that that's just a different category of affordable housing and therefore is a benefit, not something that we're layering additional cost into? So I think that's a really important thing. So that really then takes us back to the question of what would a formula look like that would do this restructuring, right? That is in 3 of these options. What would that formula look like?
And she would for a second elaborate a little bit more on the point you were making about trying to essentially kind of treat affordable home ownership as its own goods. I don't want that thread to be lost. I want that kind of.
Well, I was really struck by what Jason said, because of course, trying to build affordable townhomes, you know, is something that's in the $400,000, $5,000 range. If that's what
These will be,
consider affordable to you.
no, these will be probably 1 to 1.5.
Oh, so these are even more expensive. They're not
But
gonna.
but compared, you know.
Yeah, right. It
It's
builds the whole
1,700 square feet. There's only-
It sounds right.
So I mean, I've been saying for many years, we're bimodal, right? We have stuff affordable to very low income people. We have lots of big stuff and there's nothing in it. I did not say that.
I have a really quick question on the example that Jason's talking about. So the townhomes, is that a project that's over 1.0 FIR?
I think it's 0.95 or it's right below. Yeah.
So really it's about that lower tier too, in a sense. It's like, do we really want to approach that 1.0 differently? Do we want to say up to 1.5 should be exempt if you're providing on-site affordability? You know, I don't know, but I thought the analysis from last time was pretty clear that we're too, that it's kicking in too soon. In my opinion,
Well, the problem is because you have this backlog of 1.0, as soon as it hits, you've got that first 1.0 that all projects have to accommodate. But those ones that barely have density over 1.0 are gonna feel that much heavier than the ones that have greater.
but they're also, as you said, the ones most likely to be able to maybe incorporate some affordable housing in.
They're most likely to do that because of the cost of doing the
Of
cash
buying, yeah.
contribution, which becomes,
Then they'll be incentivized. So, you know, like, let's say whatever threshold, you're always gonna have, oh, let's say you have the, at 2 FAR, oh, all of a sudden you get all these 1.99 FAR projects. And it's like, oh, come on, you know, so it's like, how do we smooth the transition as we go through?
and if I might just add on, as far as your comment on the homeownership units, there is not really a way to distinguish because site plans are approved regardless of the tenure. A developer could choose to go condo with anything that's been approved or not. It's really kind of a not part of, yeah. So we haven't received any ownership units in the base density. They've always paid out. So there was Key and Nash. There's a 2000 Clarendon. One other. So
Okay.
there've been like 3, but the units there have all been bonus density. So
Yeah.
we've got
Russell, how can we encourage that? Is there a way to encourage that? I don't think we're doing enough for home ownership. All right, we're not doing enough for home ownership in this county.
I agree, Joe.
So how can we encourage more Key and Nash and more stuff like that? And maybe I should ask the developers.
A lot of, there isn't it has to do with where capital wants to go. Capital isn't attracted towards those types of ownership projects.
They make more money on rent.
Yeah, and there's also issues with latent liability laws. So the developers shy away from that because it really is just a kind of ticking time bomb for them.
For the people like me, the layman, can you define liability?
It means, so if a developer builds a condo building, then basically, I don't know what the number of years, but it could be like 10 years or something, that if there's structural defects found, that the developer probably would have no way of knowing that they existed at the time that they sold it, but they'd still be responsible for it.
The HOAs are very still friendly.
HOAs are set up to,
You just got to put that money in, you have to set aside that money into a.
Yeah, it's not 10, it's like
reserve
2 or
account. So
3
it's just
years.
sitting there waiting for the HOA to try.
But it's one of the.
No, I understand.
All right, this is our rainy day for the lawsuit.
Because, 90% of the multifamily that gets built is rental. And that is, if there were a way for us to put, to incentivize or encourage, but the issues are beyond the scope of local government. Really.
Smart.
I just had two sort of mini clarifying questions from where I'm from. The adaptive reuse that's going on now, are they going to be subject to this? And commercial buildings?
Yes, so actually, that brings up a great point. There we are. Excellent. So I'm happy you touched on this. So we'll pivot back to our earlier conversation later, but this is also something we should be considering, which is what should be done regarding the commercial component of the ordinance. This is apart from the conversation around building out affordable housing, but this is something that we should consider. I'm happy you brought this up.
So is that 3601 Wilson, would that be commercial, the adaptive reuse? The one we were just talking about? It's right.
But they're exempt from affordable housing.
So what's the formula here, Rob? Is it the same formula?
It's the same, except that there isn't that third tier. The third tier is the same as the second tier, first tier.
In terms of the dollar amount?
Yeah, and I think what we're trying to do is recalibrate that on-site cash contribution for residential so that they're more or less, as you said before, in parity or somewhat commensurate, probably not exactly the same, but close. You know, if that's done for that, do we also look at the commercial component, or do we leave the commercial component as is? You know, we haven't seen a lot of commercial development over the last 5 years. The commercial sector, you know, the office vacancy in Arlington is a matter of concern, and we haven't seen a lot of site plans coming in for commercial.
Yeah, so how much tinkering would impact any of that?
Right, so,
Yeah.
you know, the options really are there to
And
either.
did it generate like a third of the, if you look at the AF plot over all the years,
Hotels,
maybe generate, the commercial maybe generated a third of what AF, of all the AF?
Take a look.
So with this, while Russell is looking at that, so on the commercial side, the options are basically either to maintain the current structure and contribution rates, or to do some sort of tinkering where you basically raise in parity in a similar way to what we're doing with the AF contribution scheme. Now, I personally, because of the difficulties with the commercial market, would prefer to leave this as is. I think once Russell pulls up the numbers for you, so you can better understand the percentage of contribution there, helpful to get a better grasp of it. But as you know, the vacancy rate issue has been prevalent for years now. I don't think that there's a lot to extract there. So I'm just in favor of just kind of letting that one be. Russell might have some.
And 1 second.
And the amounts have been the same since the, is there a CPI in the rates these days?
Yeah.
sense.
Why hasn't it been, but it hasn't really been keeping up.
No, because there hasn't been any development. I mean, the CPI has been keeping,
But the amount of development hasn't. So
the development's non-existent.
But and we didn't have a CPI for a long time.
No.
Right.
It's a new word.
Residentials.
It wasn't built in at the beginning. So I think with the last 10, 12 years, it's a newer thing. It wasn't there at the beginning.
So we lost ground.
Yes. For the first several years that wasn't in play.
Starting January 2007.
There we go. Yeah, I was thinking it's came in later.
So commercial development is actually exceeded residential development contributions. It's about 53% from 2016 to 2025. Now that's on what we received, not by what was approved.
Right.
But what's actually coming. So 27 million from commercial and 23 million from residential, but that includes the 20 million from Amazon, which is a little bit of an anomaly.
Yeah.
And so that's 20 million of the 27 million.
Gotcha.
So really cashed out there.
I don't think we're gonna have another one of those.
Right.
That's 1 in 1,000 years.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, all right. So yes, to kind of pivot back to our earlier conversation around ways to holiday scheme. I appreciate point made earlier by Mary. We should be looking at, what are we trying to incentivize? Or do we want to treat affordable home ownership as its own good? I think that if we take an intuition from that, do we want to encourage more on-site CAF development, right? Or are we comfortable just moving towards the AHIF contribution pathway. Now, I think that allows us to eventually develop more projects, which then gets you affordability. They won't be committed affordable in the same way, but there's still a level of affordability that you can do. Now you have all these projects in that pipeline that you're able to fund. It's also to Mary's point, I think a responsibility of the county, frankly, to decide where projects go. I don't think that should be something that the developers necessarily have to take on. So that's why I'm leaning more towards just increasing AHIP, because I think that's more what we should be concerning ourselves.
But the developers bring them in. I mean, right? I mean, they're the ones that are, you know, the county's not, I mean, saying, here's the money, okay, and you're gonna build it here. The developers are gonna be the ones that are proposing, right?
And then
Sometimes it depends.
Yeah, and in the NOFA, they can, the county could say we have a preference
Okay,
this year that we would like to deploy our money on Langston Boulevard.
okay, yeah, okay, I forgot about that.
Because Plank Langston was.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
And
okay,
that would be the way the.
yep, 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 okay.
So it really comes down to how would you restructure the formula? How close do you want to get the cash contribution to the actual cost of providing the unit?
Mhm.
And what kind of I mean, CPI or market safeguard or something like that is built in so that there could be periodic recalibration. You know, God forbid, the bottom falls out of the market, you know, but if that happens, you would want to have a mechanism that lets you take that into account.
I imagine that we would continue to use CPI as we currently are. To your point, I think we need to have a contingency built in for that eventuality, but I want to first just kind of like decouple two things here. I think we understand this, but just as has been said, there's this conversation we're having here about changing the ordinance itself, and there's a conversation about the numbers specifically, the figure by which we are going to increase things by. Now, as I understand, that's something that staff works out. They work out some of the math there, saying, okay, given this particular configuration that you're choosing between these, right? These are the rates that would possibly come from this choice that you've made. I think what we should be focused on is looking at, out of what we have available, what seems to, as a concept, right? Conceptually, what seems to be something that gives us the most productive and equitable answer, right? Because, for example, I think option 3 is a little lacking in that it restructures the formula and creates these tiers in a way that penalizes, in my view, penalizes larger density developments, right? Which I think we should incentivize. We want that, and that, in my opinion, would disincentivize it, right? So creating tiers, we're saying, okay, if you have more density, then you're going to pay. I don't think that's something that we should.
But that's the way that is embedded. Right?
Right, it is speaking to that part of the ordinance, but there's a trying to get the word for it.
After the 1.3 FAR, that's true. But for the projects,
Right.
How many site plan projects are there?
Only a handful of sites that they're not small. Yeah.
So, and Ryan, I'm not sure that I agree with you that a building that's at 3 or 4 FAR shouldn't be at a slightly lower rate than a building that's at 10 FAR. 10 FAR district. So I guess that's the, and like I said, I think when the original ordinance was done, the 10 FARs didn't exist. And so 3, you know, it was 3 to 6, 3 to 7 was kind of the time. And then we went up to 10 in Crystal City and in
I
Roslyn.
think this is, I was corrected last meeting. I think the highest is what, 4.8 base, and then the 10 is so, and, but again, I think a lot of this depends on how we change with our, because we're doing the general land use, like that could be changing. So like we could be changing our 4.8 could be the base, or we go higher, like what, you know, I don't know what, like, you know, in certain areas, how that could change. So that could affect how, especially new area, you know, or we could open up new areas with different FAR bases, bonus levels. You know, it's like strategy. Do we just go high base and then no bonus and then you know, and I know nobody don't want to talk about bonus, but it's like, I think it does relate, because sometimes it's like, oh, we're gonna do a project with a lot of bonus, low base. That's our strategy versus like, let's just jack the base density up, but then jack up the contribution rates, get the affordable housing there versus using bonus. So it's like, there's like, I think different approaches. So I just,
Right, and if you abandon bonus, if you just say we're gonna allow cash out on bonus, do you just run it on the ethic? Do you have to even have a category that's bonus?
Yeah, I mean, one idea, I mean, it's getting to an idea I had, which is, you know, the base contributions based on the max FAR zoning district, right?
Mhm.
And the max FAR in any zoning district is 4.8. Awesome, you can get up to 10 through bonus density. If you increased the max FAR allowed for the base contribution, say 6 or 7, right? Then you inherently, and you will get more AF contributions, right? Because you're paying up to 6 or 7 FAR instead of 4.8, but that brings the bonus density contribution down.
Yeah.
So that's a trade-off, but it's one way to increase AHIF without touching the formula and having to get state approval. The county could do that. Could be across the board reason upzoning, which has its problems, but yeah.
Are there any incentives we can also give? And, you know, if they're gonna putting in a bigger contribution, there are other barriers that we could lessen or whatever. I mean, I'm looking at what the development community is here and lay them on the table. I mean, if you're giving to get, and I feel very strongly about that, then they're debating this at the national level all the time. And we should be doing that. We should not look at what we've done in the past. We have a clean slate and we should just do it. And frankly, I've been on a lot of site review committee things and hearing about tree cover and concrete density that I think goes a little bit too much in some areas. We should be doing what is practical and necessary and not to the top limit. Case in point, the Environmental Commission, I think, rejected the Penzance project because they didn't take the voluntary code environmental program. It's a voluntary program. So why penalize? Why penalize if it was voluntary? All right. So I really think for the taxpayers here and what they went through with missing middle, we should show that we're giving, you know, you got to give and take. You're going to do more, and we want to encourage developers to do this. We should be giving some allowances where safety and everything else is upheld, something like that. And I don't know what those things are because I'm not developing. So I'm looking at the development community.
Yeah, I sent an email 2-3 weeks ago with some ideas. One of which was, you know, for the county policy, which really prefers on-site units for bonus density, make it more frequent or more acceptable to get bonus density for additional AHIF contributions. That doesn't require state code change, doesn't require the zoning ordinance change or anything. Allow for, you know, AMIs up to 80% if, to your point, the average was 60% potentially. And then there's a provision in the zoning ordinance which requires you to have more on-site units if you're doing a GLUP change, which, you know, that's an issue in Langston Boulevard. changing that somehow. And then outside of the ordinance, there's the the easement vacation payment, which is a big ticket item, which is well outside the scope of what we're doing, but that's something that costs a lot of money. So those are all ideas.
I think to add on to that, I think back to the original, some of the original goals from my side of the table being certainty and sort of predictability to the extent that the bonus density process right now is the opposite of that in a lot of ways. And I think shifting to incorporate more of a structured AHIF contribution as part of a set part of that bonus density negotiation would take a lot of that uncertainty off the table.
So to that point, I just want to, so as we're thinking about this, we need some shit to highlight. We've been talking about, okay, what do we want to do? Bonus density, right? You kind of trade us what we want. I think to Greg's point, there are some liabilities with the bonus density, right? Like if you were to go down a path of just maxing it, that would eliminate some of the uncertainty in your mind, right? That developers would encounter. So I don't think that's necessarily something that is, you know, focusing on bonus, I think it has good things and bad things too. And if we're looking at this in terms of how do we increase the amount of AHIF, you could also think about it as you're increasing the amount of certainty as well, right? That's also a tangential point being made with that. And so in your example, where you said, okay, if we raise the FAR, if we're just going to like the county level analysis, we're going to raise the FAR from 4.8. Well, you're sacrificing the up to 10, but you're gaining the certainty of up to 6. So if we,
Well, I would be in opposition of decreasing the maximum that's available of bonus density. You're just shifting whether it's base, yeah, bonus versus
Base of bonus, yeah.
Right.
Sorry.
Oh, no. And if you can't just kind of like, and this is your point, is a little more serious, say that you're not eliminating the top line 10, you're just shifting from base to
We're saying 5.2 FAR delta down to 4.
Right.
Right. Yeah, and I think the one Roslyn project, my understanding is that they're getting bonus density for additional AF contributions for that project, right?
And on Boston one.
And on Boston one. So I think there's a transition towards that right now in the county, making maybe that more of a firm policy.
That was not the case when we went through our Roslyn project.
Right.
Site plan process. Staff was more advocating for on-site units. Agreed to do.
Yeah.
That negotiation particularly just gets very subjective. First coming up with an assessment per square for what the bonus density is worth, then you're having to assess, come up with a value for those on-site units to apply to the bonus density. So there are multiple levels of subjectivity as part of the process, which inures to the benefit of the development community sometimes and to the benefit of the county sometimes as well. So I don't suggest that it's only the county that's at benefit.
Ryan, do you know where the county board members are on this question of just distribute, who should be responsible for providing the distribution in the county?
Well, I'd rather not put them out. I'd rather let them speak for themselves on that question. But I will say that some of the conversations I've had just over the idea of, you know, this is the context of saying, do you think we should try to max AF? That was my thing coming in. And my rationalization was that if we get as much AF as we can, then you can incentivize development through different means as you want to, but you have the resources now to address this backlog, right? If that's something, and Eric Berg and I have spoken at some length about that, that is a great thing in and of itself and allows you to accomplish this end here. And folks seemed amenable to that. I think that was something well received. There are, of course, you know, trade-offs to this, but in my mind, it's a way for us to address an existing problem, which is this need for more resources for affordable housing development for a backlog that already exists, not to mention the need for new projects, just the one that we haven't gotten through the pipeline. And we just don't have the resources for it yet. So if we increase the AHIF, we do work more in a world of certainty, as Greg's pointed out, and we already have mentioned the need to address these projects that have already been conceptualized, but just haven't gotten off the pipeline. So that's why I'm leaning in that direction.
Well, the only reason I asked the question is that the board I served on would not have entertained. That would not have entertained.
What a difference a few decades makes. And you look great. You look great. You're there as a baby. It's only been 10 years?
Yeah, I retired 10 years ago.
Oh, wow. Then my brain is tongue.
No, I mean, they would not
Yeah.
have, they would not have walked away from onsite bonus. They would have fought tooth and nail to it. So that's the only reason. I
And what
mean,
was the rationale?
Yeah, what's
the rationale was all about distribution and access to transportation. And that's why I asked the questions I asked last time about, let's take a look at that question and let's look at us now to better understand. This is my bent, is like, I'm always thinking about what the argument was and then what the counter piece of information is that would say, you really don't need to worry about this, right? Because here's this other way to look at it, that where people do have access, even if it's not right on top of the Clarendon Metro Station or the Roslyn Metro Station.
Well, I will say, putting on my transportation commissioner hat on for a split second, I will say that we are rerouting our bus routes obviously right now, but I think we are making them more throughout the county. So we're eliminating some redundancies, but generally I think you have greater access per mileage.
Right, and I just think that becomes then part of the presentation.
Right.
As you walk away from certain things, you say, this used to be the reason why this piece of the policy was there from the beginning. But now here's the evidence of how it is today.
Here we are.
And here's why we think this is the better strategy.
Right. I think if we're considering ways in which we strategically encourage development, right, around transportation, we talk about different ways of getting people to develop. The county not so reliant upon measured around Arlington. I think this also something we should also consider in the conversation is the ability for the county to engage in city planning, right? Like we talked about implementing some level of encouragement for development in different areas. I think that also is something that is frankly not within the scope of our work, but it's something we should recommend. Is we do need the county board to take that leading role in saying this is the kind of spread that we want to create, right? And I think providing the resources for we come in, giving you the mechanisms to obtain greater aid. Now it's on you to say, okay, this is how we want to spread the money around. This is what we want to do with it. That's not what we're doing, but I think it's something worth putting forward as a recommendation, saying, okay, giving you tools. Now it's not for you to.
It could be a recommendation as if affordable housing master plan is reviewed.
Right.
That this group could say, this was outside our scope, but as we think about it, here's some things we think should be considered in the.
So I guess, tell me if I'm quoting this. When speaking about some of the numbers specifically, right, that the staff would take a look at, that would come as a result of them understanding what option they're working with.
It would be helpful if we were not looking at all four options, could kind of hone in on one, two of
Maybe
those.
describe the process just in
Well,
little, I don't want you to go.
yeah, I mean, we can come back and show, what for any of these, we know what number one is now. We wanted to change that so that it's more in line with the values that we saw. We could come back with a couple scenarios of increasing that and how that would impact projects. Obviously, because you're using the same formula, just different numbers. Be but whatever factor fits 40% more, they don't be 40% more. It's the price. Because the current formula doesn't have any relationship, the current cash formula doesn't have a relationship to the on-site formula, which we would want the other three options that are presented there. That's where you'd see projects with some different outcomes based on their density. But I think we could model that and do it like the last meeting. There was a table that had a limited number, and it was just kind of to look at projects at different densities and how that impact hit. We model that out based on that, show you what the neutral outcome would be, because any of these could be calibrated. Obviously, number one would just be keeping it the same. But for number 2, 3, and 4, you could have an outcome that produces the same amount of AHIF as we've received over the last 20 years.
Right.
Or, one that is, greater. And obviously the intent is, as stated earlier, to try to achieve kind of a more commensurate value for the cash contribution as the value. So
And I think the big thing is no matter what change, let's say we increase like by 20%, right? That's 20% more affordable housing per site. But at the same time, though, that could obviously impact feasibility or other have other consequences. But say, okay, I think it could be good to say, like, we should increase it as much as we're willing to keep whatever we're willing to give back. So like whatever the vacations or other things that, like, let's go. What is the ask? I mean, this is again the county. How many things is the county willing to do to get this contribution increased without having an impact on the cost of construction or development? And like that seems like a good baseline to go off to say, hey, we want to keep, like, if someone's building a 3-bedroom like market rate unit, that's something that we want. We need more 3-bedroom market rate units. But we also want like a 3-bedroom like committed affordable unit too. But those are super, super expensive. But then we have, obviously they have partners doing that. So like, how can we do both? And I think it's like just a matter of saying, okay, we can model and then say, hey, how much, obviously the more percentages you go, like, if we increase 10%, okay, it's feasible. Once you start going like 20, 30 like percent, we're gonna have to start doing a lot of things to really make this work. So it's not, cutting into other community benefits or just start canceling projects because, like, no, this is like too much per unit cost. We can't absorb this.
So is there a presumption that the 5% is the correct percent?
I wouldn't say there's a presumption that's the correct percent, but that is the percent that we have, and we know that even at 5%, we're undervaluing the cash contribution.
Right,
So
right.
it's not equal to that 5%.
Right.
There are other places that have in excess of 5% in the county. And I think, on Columbia Pike, they have the 20% of net new units. And I think that's been somewhat problematic for new development there. We haven't seen a lot of new development there that isn't in the neighborhoods area code where that's and that might be part of the reason why we see plenty of affordable development, but not market rate development. In the nodes where there's no affordable requirement, you've seen lots of development, but not in the neighborhood areas. So I think that's
So
another question. So
Yeah.
20 is probably might be too high. I'm not gonna say it is. 5% could be too low, but it's what is there. And I think changing one of the elements is probably, it's going to be hard to sell. Changing more than changing both at the same time would be, I think.
Right, so I just wanted to make sure we're all agreed, we're gonna stick with the 5% of GFA as the amount of square footage that we're talking about, as much as I would like to see that go up. So actually, option 1 isn't terribly different from option 2 in the sense of it's by increasing stipulated amounts by some factor. So why would you do anything other than trying to get the parity unless you really felt parity was not achievable?
Well, parity is, part of the problem with parity is, there's an average, I think. There's an average that's gonna be for all the projects. Yeah. 65 projects, we can apply it to all of them. Some, we can achieve the parity of the average, but that would mean that some of those projects would be more, negatively impacted. So I think you would want to probably have it a little bit under that so that it, but what that amount is under is.
Right, so that's something that, but between 1 and 2, there really isn't a lot of difference. And it's the same value judgment. It's on 5% of the GFA.
Yep.
And you're adjusting the number based on something. Number 2 just makes it clear that it's a relationship to the on-site unit contribution, but what other something would we choose other than, I guess I'm trying to eliminate things for you, Russell. I think 2 and 3 are kind of where we should be. And, if you could model the difference between 2 and 3 so that there might be a tiered rate that does something relative to density. But also then I think we have to throw in the bonus question.
Could I ask on option 3? Because option 3, puts more, there's greater expectations on higher density projects, which if we're trying to make it more in relation to that 5%, larger projects right now don't have to, that they're still contributing 5% or whatever that GFA is, but it doesn't go up when you hit 6.0 FAR. You don't have another tier to say at 6.0 you're going to contribute 7.5%. So I'm just wondering, it kind of makes it more out of a line with other, and that's okay.
Right, and I guess that's why I say with 3, I think it's actually a conversation about are you going to treat bonus differently?
They're treating bonus differently, just so.
So going back to the certainty question, if what happens is as you move up, and you leave it at 4.8 and it tiers using your past history of what's been negotiated for bonus, that somehow that becomes between 4.8 and you do 4.8 to 6.5 and 6.6 to 10.0, and you say, the dollar amount is more here and it's commensurate with what you would have paid to get out of that on-site bonus unit. And so then we can do away with that and it's just one whole thing. Maybe not.
Doesn't this depend looking at historical zoning maps? The base has been pretty, I don't think there's, besides Roslyn, I think pretty much we've been CO 1 point, it's right. I think it's been pretty constant for about 30 years. So it's who knows what we could be looking at in 5 to 10 years. We could have huge, I don't know. It's just.
Right.
Clearance 3.0.
Yeah.
A lot of projects are.
Yeah.
You're just paying for a lot for the bonus density.
Well, that's what I'm saying. If you want to add certainty and you want to, we leave the negotiation around bonus. We want to cash out bonus. If that's where this group is, then why not just put it all into the T structure?
That changes the zoning and look.
Does it?
But that's a future, we don't know what, I mean, we're doing the whole land, the whole
Why does
master plan.
it, why does
thing.
it change the club?
Well, because the base is based on that max glove amount. And then there's bonus that's above the max glove. So
So, but then the building is results in being 7.0. Right? So you still have to earn your bonus.
Just
It's
paying it
the
out.
calculation for paying it out. That's clear.
and I think that's one of the recommendations that's been made, and it's bonus density. It's kind of a separate and kind of a scope from here.
Hmm.
But I think it's a recommendation that I'm hearing from this group is that we should have more clearer guidance and expectations on what that bonus density policy is and when we prefer the cash out option and some of the parameters around what that cash out looks like. So there's more certainty. So
Yeah.
That's certainly an avenue to explore, but it's
I would assume that
a little bit out of the
I
ordinary.
would assume that gets tricky because my perception is there are a lot of other constituencies that county staff is trying to appease by virtue of that bonus negotiation.
Yes.
So there are competing priorities.
Yes.
It's just trying to make certainty around the house.
Uh-huh.
Understood.
Yeah, so I think that's a great point, and I think we've actually gotten to kind of the crossroads here, and I want to kind of define some of the timeline and where I like see things going from here. So I'm in favor of having staff take a look at options 2 and 3, having run the numbers on the analysis of it, and over the month of August, like for us to have another meeting. I know it's not common, but this is uncommon work. So I think it's appropriate that we have a virtual meeting to convene the 3rd Tuesday of the month, as we usually do, to discuss those results. In the meantime, I'd like for a group of very dedicated and willing individuals to, once we have the data from the county staff, which I've been told take maybe about 2 or so weeks for them to run that, get that for us. That puts us beginning of August, give or take. That gives a smaller group of people who are interested in to crunch these numbers and try to build out the language about 3 weeks or so to do so. As we heard during our April meetings way back when we began this process, there were 1 or 2 individuals who were kind of just putting pen to paper and getting the language out. And as I've talked to staff recently, luckily for us, right? Speaking for myself, I'm not a lawyer. I don't know how many lawyers are in the room, but might just be you, but there are county attorneys that are paid to actually proofread and make sure all the comments are in the right place, make sure all the language is appropriate. So I don't want there to be pressure on people to think that, oh, the language that you have to come up with has to be perfect. It doesn't have to be perfect, because none of us getting paid for it to be perfect. But there are people who, once we come up with a good rough draft, right, we will discuss it at our August meeting. You can look at the option, look at the language put forward by the smaller group that will work on this language, and then decide how to move from there, present that to the Housing Commission for their review at their September meeting, which I believe is September 4th. Is that correct? So we'll have that to them for September 4th. And at that point, once they look at it, ask questions, probably bring in members from the community that are interested in hearing about this, there's an opportunity to circulate in that way. We will then present it to the county attorneys, who at the direction of the county board will put the finishing touches on it. So that's what the long view of this looks like.
So it goes from the Housing Commission then to the county board.
That's correct.
after the lawyers review it and the manager reviews it. Is that right, Russ?
I'm not sure if it's from the housing commission, it would go the commission to the board because it's not a staff recommendation. The staff recommendation would go to the county.
So I'm
Staff would
sorry.
the manager's office apply.
I'm sorry, maybe I misordered that. No, it would go from the housing commission to the board. Board would then task the attorneys
Okay.
to,
That
Give a
makes
recommendation.
language.
That makes more
I
sense.
flipped them around. So yes, that's how the process would go. Now, as I said, I've been in communication with a number of the county board members to understand where we are in this process. As things are developing through August, we'll try to keep them apprised on the calendar so that we have an understanding and that there is little friction in going from housing commission, county board to attorneys. Because ultimately, as said earlier, we would need to make this a legislative priority, which requires us getting a champion in Richmond. And the first hurdle, of course, is ensuring the county board is on board making it a priority, as we know. So there are a number of layers. That's why I've been trying to have these conversations sooner rather than later, to make the lift at the back end that much lighter. So we're not trying to do all of this at the very end. So there'll be a lot going on in the month of August, but please reach out to the staff if you are interested in being boots on the ground, right? Getting through these numbers and writing the hard document. Again, doesn't be perfect. That's not what we're aiming for. But once we get the data from staff evaluating options 2 and 3, we'll then circulate that. And if you're interested in fleshing out the language as has been done in the past 20 some years ago, please, reach out to me.
A procedural question, and I forget, when we were briefed at the April meeting, did that have to go to the state legislature? I thought the whole deal was they kind of punted and there was a suit and then this was a compromise and we just worked off this compromise.
Well, so Governor Kane did sign off on it, so it did have to go to Richmond. At the time, we had Mary Martin Whipple.
It's in the
Okay,
state.
yeah.
So it does have to.
It's in state statute and it's in our ordinance. So it has to be changed in both places.
Okay.
Yes, so at the time, yeah, is state, and so we had Mary Martin helping at the time as really shepherd on this effort. And she showed a little picture along with Tim Kaine then doing the little signing. I think he came up here to Arlington to actually do that signing. So
That's a big deal.
that was a big deal, and it does require approval to Richmond. So that's the pathway forward for Kaine. So in the meantime, as we're working on the details, I will be communicating to some of my friends in Richmond to say, hey, I've got this proposal that some folks who are really working hard on this are drafting up for you. We have a conversation. I think that will help once we have a tangible to say, this is the thing I was talking about. So I think that should be more encouragement if you are so inclined to reach out and really get your hands dirty with this, because this is it, right? Once we get the data on those two options, we're able to evaluate and make a judgment call. That's where we going from there. So with that, over time, but not too bad. I think it's about actually the time that I was late for, so I got my time. But with that, I really appreciate you all and what you've done the last several months. So I'm excited to get to kind of the rubber meeting the road part of this, and after we get the data from staff, I'll circulate that. Establish practice.
Cindy, we had a great conversation.
Cindy and Erica are
She's
just